Welcome to the Gutsy Fertility Podcast, where health empowerment meets heartfelt conversations. I'm your host, Dr. Mandy Patterson, functional naturopath and fertility expert. Each episode of the Gutsy Fertility Podcast is a journey through the most pressing health topics of our times, viewed through the lens of functional naturopathy and emotional empowerment. So get ready to get gutsy with me as we hop into today's podcast topic. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Gutsy Fertility Podcast. I am excited about our guest today, Annika Carrol. She is a sleep and health coach, CEO of Sleep Like a Boss, and former Fortune 100 senior HR manager. She specializes in the intersection of sleep, leadership, and well-being. Her journey from burnout to balance drives her mission to empower high-achieving women to conquer sleep issues and fatigue. With a focus on functional testing and stress management techniques, she helps clients reclaim restful sleep and vitality. Annika's expertise has been recognized by People's Magazine Online, Sleepopolis, Mind Body Green, and The Spruce. Welcome, Annika.
Hi, Mandy. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad you're here, girl. Let's talk about your story and journey and how you went from an HR manager that managed many people to a sleep and health coach.
Yes, I actually have a background in international business. So after I was done with that, I went into human resources. I worked at Johnson & Johnson for 15 years. And as an HR person, yes, you do some of the not so fun stuff, like the restructuring and letting go of people. But I also, one of my big things was leadership coaching, resiliency, all those things, right? Like helping people through their health, sometimes even mental health things that came up at work, all these things. And I burnt myself out. It was actually a bit of a more complex story that I never at that point saw. So I was pregnant. And then our son was born extremely early. He was in NICU for 12 weeks. And that was a very traumatic experience for me.
Yes.
I got pregnant super easily. Doctor was like, come off the pill. I'm like, coming off the pill. 2 months later, I was pregnant. He's like, well, that was quick. Then the kid came early, which was very surprising. And
so what happened? Like, what caused him to be born early?
We really I never got a medical explanation for that.
Okay.
It was quite funny because we lived in Germany at that point, because I'm from Germany originally, and my husband and I lived there, and we went to Canada to visit. So I was 6 months pregnant. We came here. I was super tired all the time. My mother-in-law was like, this is all this is all weird. I was fine. I thought I was fine. We came home to Germany that night. I felt off. I had lower back pain, serious lower back pain. I did not read those in those newsletters that you get when you're pregnant. You subscribe to all these. Oh, week 10 this is what you're experiencing. Week 12. Yes. So for week 27, they didn't have anything in there that was abnormal. There was nothing that said, if you have lower back pain, you could be having contractions. I had no idea. And so we were home that night. I felt really bad. I couldn't sleep. So I got up. I was hungry. I ate. I went back to bed. I actually slept. And then the next morning, I was like, I'm bleeding. And I called my OBGYN, and he's like, don't even come to the practice, straight to the hospital. Yes. And then the whole thing was they were like, well, and then the water broke eventually. And they're like, well, there is enough. We might be able to hold this for a while. And then they're like, yeah, are we going to try this naturally? And then the doctor's like, there is a high risk because the kid is so young. Why don't we do it? I'm like, save this kid, save me, literally just get this. Yeah. And then he was in NICU for 12 weeks, and they ran all kinds of tests on me after, because they wanted to figure out what it was. They were like, was it an infection? Was it something? They never found out. What I think it was, in retrospect, is low progesterone. If you ask me, I think it's low progesterone. The fact that I got pregnant within 2 months, I think, was luck. I did not prepare my body for this pregnancy whatsoever. Like
Oh my gosh, I'm
I've
so
never been
glad
an
you're
unhealthy
saying that.
person, right? Like I was not,
Yeah.
I was exercising. I've always eaten really well, all those things. But if I look back, I was on birth control forever, probably 15 years.
Yes. Yes.
And I did not. I went to the doctor at my checkup. He's like, everything looks good. You can come off the pill. It's going to maybe take a while till your periods come back. We want them to come back and then you can try.
Yeah.
And there it was. I think that should have been a way longer process with supporting the body, but I did not know at that time, right? And I was a stress case. Like I'm type A, go, go, go person. And that's how and he
Yeah.
knew the OBGYN. And he's like, you are going to have to slow down. He's like, you're going to feel this because you're pregnant now. And then the classic, I'm not sick. He's like, no, but your body,
Yes.
like, slow down. And I wasn't doing, like, from my perspective, from my like standard, I wasn't even doing that much. But I think I'd been riding on stress hormones for decades.
Sure. Yeah.
And
Right.
it was just, the body was just like, oh, like this, we're not balanced here yet. This is gonna not, but who knew? And
Yeah.
then there was, yeah. And I think it was, in the end, it was stress induced. That's what I think it was.
Well, I'm so glad you're bringing this up because similar situation, my firstborn, he was a 28 weeker, spent 16 weeks in the NICU, had many, issues, medical issues and complications. And so mine was pregnancy induced hypertension. So preeclampsia, and I went into kidney and liver failure. And same situation as you. They didn't know what caused it. And then afterwards I had all of this testing, including genetics. They looked to see if I had lupus and antiphospholipid syndrome and all of the list. But I am like you. I think what it was a perfect storm. I was stressed like you, like invincible, right? When you're 22, 23 years old, you don't think that something life-threatening can happen. And then I got some sort of illness on top of it, and it literally just put me over. And so on the podcast, we talk a lot about prepping for pregnancy and giving our bodies plenty of time to prep. So I'm so glad you brought this really important piece up because I am like you. I think that could have been prevented had I walked through the steps to prepare adequately for the pregnancy. So
I know, and I find Western, and my doctor afterwards, he's like, I'm so sorry, like, that this happened. But it was like, he's like, I didn't see it coming. I was like, no, I didn't really see it either. But they're just not trained that way. And they look at it differently. They have their markers and they say, yes, if this is basically, if you ovulate, you're good to go. Yes. Right? It's like, no,
right.
Like, we're going through you're healthy. You're like, you look healthy. All your markers are generally fine. It's like, yeah, but my body was depleted. I was a stress case.
Right. Yeah.
And I still think, looking at my child now, I still think that high cortisol during pregnancy, he's more on the anxious spectrum. He's not on the spectrum. I shouldn't use the word spectrum. He is just like, anxiety is a thing for him. And I'm convinced that is because I pumped cortisol into this child all the time.
That's exactly our experience as well. Same thing. My son deals with a lot of cortisol issues himself. And, we've ran genetics. And what's interesting about his case, because I'm actually going to be presenting it in July to some physicians and researchers. But he even has also some genetics that predispose like him to have more vivid recall of long-term memory with dreams and those kinds of things. And so they're more prone to PTSD.
And we just had to go through surgery with him a couple of years ago because there have been some complications from the early birth. And the first surgery didn't go so well in terms of how they did the anesthesia and stuff. He has from that traumatic, and you can, like, the way he reacts to it, and 2 years later still processes it is exactly that. It's like the detail. The detail isn't fading over time. Really, it's that. Yeah, the triggers are like everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. How old is he now,
10.
Annika? He's 10. Okay. And my oldest is 22.
Wow.
So yeah, it's been really interesting to see. And Bailey ended up with necrotizing enterocolitis. So he had strictures in his small intestine. And for our listeners, strictures are basically narrowing of scar tissue in the bowel. So they had to go in and cut all of that out and reconnect him. So the poor kid has had a lot to deal with, not only psychologically, like you said, with that early response in me that imprinted. And it's interesting because if you start diving into genetics, they talk about genetic imprinting, and that happens very early on in the first 3 months, and it has to do with methyl bookmarks. And learned a lot from Dr. William Walsh on this, but that is where it's really important for the mom's nutrition to be on spot, on key, because that really is setting that baby up for the rest of his or her life. It's fascinating. So yeah, it's interesting to hear your case as well on that. We've learned so much as moms, right? Yeah. So let's talk about, because I know that was like a lot for you to share about, but like, so you had him, he's 10. And then at what point did you make that shift in career where you were like, okay, this isn't working for me any longer?
I went back to work after a year. So in Germany, it's like you can have a year of parental leave. I did that, came back into a job I hated. And with a child who at that point was like medically not stable was very hard. And then that already kind of put me down another path where I was like, I got sick a lot. I don't get sick. Like normally I was put on antibiotics because ear infections weren't going away for 2 weeks. All these red flags that I just completely ignored. I did what the doctor said. It didn't work. I didn't feel well, but I just kept going. And then I got a job that I loved, and I really kind of burnt myself out in that, but it felt good because I loved it and I killed it and it was great and I had the reward. And then I got put in another job that I didn't like so much. And we were going through a restructuring at the time in the company. And we knew that about 50% of us were going to lose their job. But I also kind of wanted to get out because that restructuring, that new organization wasn't what I wanted to be part of. But I didn't even ever make it to that, because then at Christmas, my husband and I both got food poisoning.
Oh my gosh.
For a day. Like I was even just like a few hours. He was like all day. He was fine after. I did not recover from that. And then I went to see doctors and they did tests. They're like, maybe you have H. pylori, which apparently I didn't, because they put like cameras down my throat and did like sampling and stuff. Nobody ever looked at my gut. It's like, you've thrown up. It must be in your stomach. I'm also bloated like 6 months pregnant every night. Like, guys, something isn't right here. The doctors ran a bajillion tests, found nothing. And my doctor actually ran a lot more than normally a GP would. And then I eventually, one morning, I was on oatmeal and bananas for weeks because that was all I could eat. And then one morning I worked from home because my boss was like, maybe work from home for a couple of days. Like, you're not doing well, right? You're not recovering. So I did that. My husband came back from the grocery store and I just sat there and that was it. And he's like, what's going on? I'm like, I'm done. I'm done. I can't. He's like, okay, we're shutting the computer. We're going to see another doctor. And the first thing they said, we'll run more tests and you should see a therapist. Which, of course. Which, you know what? In the end, was that a puzzle piece for me? Yes, it was. Because that whole trauma from the birth and stuff had never been addressed. So yes, that was a piece, absolutely. But it was a small piece in the end.
Right.
And they all didn't really.
So it really goes back to that unresolved trauma and conflict, which we talk about a lot of. Many of us have adverse childhood events that really do impact us throughout our life. And if we don't deal with it, then it impacts our physical health as well, our emotional health.
I think that trauma from the birth really was what, like, for me, put me in that constant fight of, like, I was constantly. And then I would get, once the burnout came and the child would, and he would be crying sometimes at the dinner table, I would get panic attacks. Like, I'd have to leave the table. I could not, like, it was bad. And then nobody could help me. Then I went to see a naturopathic doctor, and she found some stuff because she ran different tests. So I got a little better. And
Okay.
then we moved to Canada. So now that's a whole other big thing, right? And then I was kind of like, oh, I'm burning out again.
Right.
And I was like, I'm going to work with some people because I'm going to catch this early. And I started working with a functional diagnostic practitioner. And she was like, well, I kind of didn't catch it early. It's kind of, you're probably still in it. Your body hasn't fully recovered, but you're not in a great state yet. And then we worked through it and I got well. And I was like, and at that point, I'd already trained to be a nutritionist. And then I was like, okay, no, I want to do the testing. I was like, the key is in the data because I'm a data person.
Yeah.
And so then I went to school and trained for it. And then sleep was just, it was the weirdest thing. When I was burnt out and I was exhausted, I would fall asleep, and every night from like 1 to 3 a.m., I would be bright awake. And I'm like, I'm exhausted. I can barely make it through the day. Why the heck can't I sleep?
Right.
My body is screaming for
right.
rest. And it just didn't work. And that's kind of where I was like, yeah, that's the thing that I used to be amazing at. Like when I was my go, 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 I would hit the pillow, get up before the alarm, all stressed, but I didn't know that, right? But I did, I could sleep through the night. And I was like, no, this is the biggest thing. And then if you just start talking to people, so many people are like, yeah, I'm not sleeping. I'm not sleeping well. I'm not sleeping well. It's like, oh yeah, this is a big problem.
Yeah, absolutely. See it all the time in my practice. I mean, really, like a person's quality of sleep significantly correlates with their level of health. Find it every single time. So, and like you said, having to do with that cortisol, melatonin rhythm and what's going on. And so many people are walking around upside down with that curve, or they're flatlined because they're like so exhausted and like, and I've been like that throughout my life too. I think, driven women, like even men, we pour so much into our jobs and like the things that we're doing, the projects, that we forget to be checked into our body. So let's talk about why is sleep just so important for overall health and fertility? Like, what did you find out? How did you make those shifts?
You need to recover, right? That's the thing. You need to give your body a break. And we often don't do it. We're busy. And then with women so much, or maybe if you're already a parent, or even if not, you might be like, I can't just come home from work, maybe went to the gym, quickly eat something, and then I'm like, no, I can't go to bed now because I have to have an hour and a half to just kind of wind down, and I want to watch that Netflix show, and I want to drink that glass of wine because I need that to also kind of unwind because I've created this habit. And then all of a sudden it's 11:30, it's midnight, and you're like, okay, I'm going to go to bed, and then it's 6 a.m. and the alarm goes off, and there we are. And it's just... Sleep deprivation has been, and that is sleep deprivation. People are like, oh, people who are in emergency rooms working, they're sleep deprived. No. If you do not get your daily dose of what your body needs, that's sleep deprivation. You're already in a deficit. And that has just been shown so much to affect everything. It affects your mood. Women specifically, all the women I see with anxiety or depression, is like, nah, let's get your sleep and check and you'll be better, because it helps you regulate that. It does affect obesity. It does affect heart health. It does affect just everything in a way, right? It's just it's foundational. That's basically what it is. It's foundational. And the way we live our lives now, we've just really gone away from making it a priority. And if you think about fertility and specifically, so if we think about how sleep works or how the human body works, is you were just touching on the circadian rhythm. So we have this sleep-wake cycle, basically. We have cortisol that should be high during the day, and we have melatonin, our sleepy hormone, that should be high at night. The more we stress over time, our body might not be able to make enough cortisol anymore, because it's like, you're just firing here on all cylinders. I'm going to dial this down, or I just can't keep up with what you're trying to achieve, right? asking for too much, and it's going to start eventually to have you use adrenaline because you still need energy. And we can relate to that. We're like, our cortisol curves are flat. Our curves are flat, but I still have some energy. Yeah, that's adrenaline. And that's not so great.
And adrenaline's just propping it up. It's like, so if you're struggling and like you're not getting enough sleep, what many people reach for is their coffee in the morning. And that's like, propping it up. So it's not our actual innate, production
giving us that energy.
And so that people are kind of, people are tricked by that because they think, oh, I'm okay.
Absolutely.
I'm okay. Until later in the day.
Absolutely. So, and what can happen, because if we now look at fertility, so we do want healthy levels of progesterone for the women, for sure, right? Because we want to ovulate and we want to be able to implant that egg in the uterus. So what does the body do? The body is really smart. So for your morning cortisol, what the body does, if you do not have enough cortisol, the body can take some of your progesterone and can convert that into cortisol to give you energy, and you will not have enough progesterone to be fertile the way we want you to have a sustainable, healthy pregnancy. That's not going to happen. And if we don't sleep, most of us still have high levels of cortisol at that time, right? The body can still sustain that for a bit. Mm-hmm. So we really need to get that balance of sleep and action, right? We want to exercise. We want to be in good health, but we need to get that recovery so that cortisol can come down to a healthy level. The body is okay with it. And the body can say, oh yeah, the progesterone, great. We need that. And then the other thing is, if you've burned yourself out, like I have, and I don't know what your numbers look like, but mine were pretty flatline. So at that point, when cortisol is really flatlined, there's another hormone that's called DHEA that we need, because that makes estrogen and testosterone. Also two very important hormones when we talk about fertility. And if we're really low on cortisol, likely the body's going to start down-regulating your DHEA because they're counterparts, and the body is smart and it feels, oh no, there's too much DHEA now because there's no more cortisol. Let's down-regulate that. And what's going to happen if the input to estrogen and testosterone is low? Your testosterone and your estrogen are also going to be low. So that also affects fertility. So it's so important that we get that circadian rhythm, that amount of cortisol that the body has, right. And then with that, the melatonin, because they just kind of follow each other a bit.
Absolutely. I love how you really broke that down into like a really easy concept, something that is very complicated when we dive into cholesterol and cortisol and the hormones. And, I see a lot of people that there's such myths around cholesterol, right? That, oh, well, my cholesterol's too high. And like we've been taught, from the conventional lens that, oh, that causes heart disease and like all of these other things. But what we have not been told is the importance of cholesterol as being a precursor to all of those downstream hormones and sex hormones. So, and if we're stressed and if we're eating the standard American diet or the standard Canadian diet or German diet, whatever it is, like we're going to have inflammation in our body, and cholesterol then is going to be probably out of range for optimizing fertility and hormones. So I love how you talked about that. And so like, what do you see in your own practice? Why are people struggling so much with sleep? What is it? What do you see?
Is there, to me, I look at sleep from basically, I would say three areas. So the one is, for sure, is stress a problem? Yes. If you go to your doctor and they say, oh, and you say you can't sleep, they're like, you're too stressed. And you're like, oh my God, but what am I supposed to do? Like life is just like that, right? To a degree, they're correct. But the sleeping pill is not going to fix that problem. Neither is the antidepressant, because that's likely what they're going to prescribe. The other thing I look at is that I think behavior is a big problem. So how do we use our phones? How do we support our sleep-wake cycle? When do we eat? How do we eat? What do we eat? Alcohol, caffeine, stimulant control, all that is, to me, is behavioral. So that is a big part. The last part is physiological. It's, what does my gut look like? What is going on with my hormones?
Yes.
What is going on with my minerals and vitamins? Are there heavy metals at play? What are my neurotransmitters doing? That's one of the big ones. Because and to me, this is a puzzle. So some people weigh higher on one puzzle piece, somebody else weighs higher on another puzzle piece. But what do I see? And you were just touching on it. Everybody who isn't sleeping in my practice has inflammation. We all have, there's leaky gut with everybody. So we have not just gut inflammation, we likely have systemic inflammation. We potentially have inflammation in the brain, which is going to really make it really hard for the body to just say, oh my God, just let me sleep. A lot of them are still riding on pretty high cortisol, because cortisol is anti-inflammatory until it's not and it becomes inflammatory. But a lot of them are really stressed because their body is also stressing on top of their life. And that makes it really hard to sleep. And because their guts are a mess, and this is not just judgmental, mine was too. Because if your gut's a mess, your gut produces what we call neurotransmitters. I don't know if your audience is familiar with that. So those are little chemical messengers that are made in the gut that go to your brain and that either excite you or they calm you down. And if our gut if the microbiome isn't set up the way we want it to, with the balance of good and bad gut bacteria, your body starts potentially making too little of the calming neurotransmitters and too much of the excitatory neurotransmitters. And you can try to sleep, you can meditate the hours a day, you're likely not going to get significant improvement if we don't look at that imbalance, if we don't try to correct that imbalance. And yes, do we have to do the other things too? Do we have to look at our lifestyle? Do we have to look at our diet? Do we have to see how we deal with stress? What we put on our plates? How we overschedule ourselves? Yes. But it's one for I would say for 100% of my clients, it's one piece of the equation.
So a question for you is, as a high performing executive woman, that's what you are. Like, how did you make this sustainable long term to put, is it micro habits into your lifestyle? Did you tuck them in there? How did you do this? Because that is a really hard thing for many type A high performing people, is to be like, okay, I'm going to stop working right now and I'm going to go for a walk outside, or, I'm going to get off my phone right now. So how do you do that? And how do you work with people in your practice?
Yeah. So let me preface this by saying I'm not perfect yet either. I'm still working on it. And there's lots of weeks where it doesn't work and where I see it affect my sleep also quickly. And then come perimenopause and then the whole fun other sleep stuff starts. But so what do I do and what do I do with my clients? The first step we work on is really resetting your sleep-wake cycle. Getting the management, because cortisol and melatonin both work. Cortisol works with light. So having bright light triggers cortisol. So that's why we always say get off your phone at night, because that cortisol triggers cortisol release, and then melatonin can't make you sleepy. Melatonin totally works the opposite. It works with darkness. It's the darkness hormone. So what we do, first thing we do is we optimize that so that their body is starting to get back into a natural rhythm. And how do we do that? You go outside. First thing in the morning, you wake up and you either open that window all the way, or ideally you go outside, step on your porch for 10 minutes, or walk your dog around the block. Go around the block, get natural light. Leave the sunglasses at home.
Yes.
And really just get natural light in your eyes so your body knows, because the angle of which these sunlight rays fall into your eye give your brain the signal what time it is. That literally sets your inner body clock to release hormones, to release enzymes, to help with digestion, to help with hormonal balance over time. And if you do that, and I have everybody do that at least 5 days a week, I would say within the first 5 days, everybody says, I have so much energy in the afternoon. I don't even need that coffee anymore.
Yeah.
Yes. And with that,
Right.
what also happens with that is you're likely going to start getting tired a little earlier. People are actually noticing it quite a bit. It doesn't mean an hour. It could be 15 minutes, 30 minutes, but then you listen to that signal and go to bed. And with that, we've shifted your circadian rhythm already in a bit of a healthier state, and you have energy and you can start doing the other things that we then want to do, like building other habits in a better way.
Yes. I love that. I love that. I really do feel like even in my own practice, like sleep is like the number one essential that like we start working on from day one, because it is going to be the life force to be able to do and accomplish all the other things that we want to do and make us from a regulation side of things more regulated.
Absolutely.
So,
And I think, and the one thing is the light, right? It's the cortisol. So, and then at night, I make them avoid light as much as they can. Do they need to sit in the dark?
Yes.
No, they don't. But like, dim your lights. Try to avoid these overhead LEDs in your house. Your
Yes.
brain literally thinks the sunlight is shining directly down at it, so it must be 12 o'clock noon. So you're not going to get tired. You're not going to really wind down
Right.
and are able to get a good night's sleep. So really playing with that light and dark at the right times of day is a really big first step.
Sure. Yeah. No, I agree with that. And I think like diving into a little bit more like some of the health practices you recommend for people to like optimize sleep. So what does that look like?
What do you mean by optimize sleep? What would somebody be struggling with?
So like for instance, like I know when I'm coaching people, like we talk about not eating past say 5 or 6 o'clock at night, right? Like that's because you don't want to be, your body doesn't want to be digesting food when you're
the rule of thumb that is always given is don't eat a heavy meal within 3 hours before you go to bed. I think that works for some. That doesn't work for the heavy meal. Yes, we don't want to eat a heavy meal at 9 p.m. and go to bed at 10:30. You're not going to sleep because your body's heavily digesting. But there are a lot of people who wake up 1, 2, 3 a.m. And we have to start, if that's you, we have to start digging deeper. What is causing that for you? And that might be your liver not being optimally performing. That might be a parasite if it happens around the full moon. And people are always like, yeah, I see them more often than I would like to. They're quite common.
Me too.
Candida overgrowth is a huge one with waking. But the other one that could be a waking thing is blood sugar dysregulation. And a lot of people have blood sugar dysregulation, not knowing. And so what could happen, it could actually go both ways. It could be that your blood sugar drops too low, below a certain line at night, and your body thinks it's basically starving and dying and is releasing cortisol to wake you up. And then it normally takes you about an hour and a half to fall back to sleep because the body needs to break down that cortisol. That takes that long for then melatonin be able to be high enough to make you fall back asleep. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes it could be you ate something that your body isn't happy with. It's actually reacting to it without you potentially even knowing. It's not that you're getting hives or itches or breaking out, but you could be having a food sensitivity to something that causes the opposite. And what goes up must come down. So it could be that just these fluctuations in blood sugar at night are what's waking you up. And if you're somebody who wakes up, and I sometimes have that if I don't eat well during the day, and I wake up and I'm actually hungry, then you already know this is a blood sugar issue. And then please go and eat something, even if it's 3 a.m, because otherwise you're not going to fall back to sleep. So it's really this kind of, we have to kind of see, there is that general rule of don't eat too close to bedtime. But if you're somebody who has frequent wakings, make sure you eat well during the day. Sufficient amounts of protein, sufficient amounts of fat, not the only starchy carbs, but like the good veggies, right? And then potentially try a small snack, half an hour-ish, an hour-ish before bedtime. And by that, I mean maybe a few nuts, if you can do nuts, a few nuts, piece of cheese, a cracker with some nut butter on it, or some cottage cheese with a little bit of fruit, like some berries, not like a banana, maybe even. Sometimes that helps people get over that drop so the body has enough to go. But that's really individual. That's really something to try out and see what's going on in your body.
Yeah, I agree. I think everybody's different. And like you said, there's actually different stages of insulin resistance, for people. And like, you have to just listen to the body, and then hear what the body's telling you. And so I know even sometimes, like, I have really entrenched diabetics that, like, they are waking up at night. We know it is blood sugar dysregulation. And we talk about, okay, what does a decent snack look like to get you back on track? And it's honestly like training the body again. It's like you got your training wheels on as you're working through trying to lower the blood sugar levels or balance them, and get them in that
And
rhythm.
diabetics,
So
I find that can take a moment, right? Well, somebody who isn't, we can probably tweak that because they're just more insulin sensitive. They just react faster to things and can better compensate for a while a diabetic might react quite aggressively to certain foods. So that sometimes just give yourself some grace and just try and work on it. It's just going to be a little journey, but it'll work.
That's right. It just takes a little time, like your client that you were just talking about before we came on the interview. What did he say again? Because I love what he said when he was talking to his doctor about what
yeah, that
functional
basically
medicine
he
is.
described it as that we're detectives, right? And we look for all the different factors that impact a condition, and then we turn all the wheels to make everything work together well. And I think that, yes, that's basically what we do. And it's a great description.
Brilliant. I love it. I love it. Okay, so talk to me about, is there any other things that you would like to chat about with the audience today about, like, what you find to be really high leveraging things that they could do as far as implementing? Because I know, like, people can kind of overthink this, right? And really, like, it goes back to the simple foundations, and sleep being a big one of those. But like you hit on, also a well-rounded nutritional plan that incorporates adequate and ample amounts of protein and quality carbohydrates and good fats, right? Like, for so long we were told, even back in the 90s in the US, like, oh, fats, you need to do low fat everything and like those things. But like, I know a lot of women and couples that I'm working with in fertility, like, fats, good quality fats.
I think that's part of why honestly,
I
think that's part of, I was like a low fat girl for a long time. I think that's part of what messed with it. Absolutely. And I think if it comes to sleep, but also you probably do that with your clients when it comes to fertility. And when we talk about nutrition, anti-inflammatory foods, we need to heal the gut. And like what I do with my clients, if you want to sleep, alcohol's off the table. That would be the same thing in fertility. Sometimes dairy, depending on how bad the inflammation is. Sugar, added sugars, like the white bad stuff, is off the table as best as we can. And and then anti-inflammatory foods. So everything whole foods. We try to put as much as our own, like, single ingredient things that we cook with, right? Vegetables, fresh grains, fresh protein sources, everything ideally as fresh as we can. And if we buy it, that we make sure it's as clean as possible, because we just want to give the body a break and we need it to heal the gut. And if we keep pouring oil in the fire, like, we're just not going to get there. The other thing, because alcohol is the one where people are always like, it helps me sleep. No, it doesn't. It sedates you. Like, just if you're not sleeping, take the alcohol out. And the other one that's often a thing is the question about caffeine. And I'm a sleep, and there's different sleep coaches out there. Do I say you can't have caffeine? No, I don't say that, unless you have serious anxiety. If you're somebody who struggles with anxiety, I really would highly recommend to just take it out and see how you're doing. The other thing is, I don't want you to wake up and have the coffee right away, because I want you to see how we were talking about cortisol. and you were describing it too, right? That we're kind of faking it a little here with our energy levels when we put caffeine in the system. I would like you to see how well your body reacts with sunlight to energy levels first. So within that first hour or so after you wake up, ideally no caffeine, and see where you get to. And then you can have a coffee, and I generally cut them off at 1 p.m. So nothing after that, so that the body has enough time to get the caffeine out of the system, because it does take a long, long time for most people to metabolize caffeine. And if we're not sleeping, then we really don't want these kind of sneaky saboteurs in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some people that even do drink a lot of coffee, they don't even realize, even if they think that they sleep well, their quality of sleep is somehow impacted. They just don't know because they've always done it, or it's been a long-term habit that they've had, that they, like you said, they don't really know what their actual body feels like without being on it.
And the interesting thing is when you take it out or you reduce it and you then put 1 extra cup back in, you are going to feel the difference. You're going to feel what that caffeine can do if your receptors aren't totally desensitized from it, because you've been having so much. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. Okay, well, as we round out the podcast today, what would be 3 tips you would tell the audience as far as getting their sleep on track and really using that to help improve their
My number 1 tip
health?
is the one we talked about, is get that morning natural light. Get that morning natural light.
Yes.
Make sure you eat well-balanced meals throughout the day. Do not starve yourself, because your blood sugar is gonna not thank you for it. You're not gonna sleep well. And the last one is make sure your bedroom is dark, pitch black dark, cool, and quiet. And if it's not like that, get yourself a blackout curtain. Make sure you can lower the temperature in the bedroom. If you cannot do that individually with your thermostat, maybe think about a fan or something to really lower the temperature a little. Your body needs that cool to sleep. And if it's loud where you live, earplugs might be something that might work. If your partner snores, earplugs, or have a discussion about. And I know with fertility, people are going to be like, are you crazy? But is there a few nights where you sleep in a different room just so you get sleep, if that is what really potentially disrupts your sleep? And they should probably get checked for sleep apnea if there's more.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was going to say. Yes. Get your partner checked for sleep apnea, or if you're the one that snores, get checked. And I think rounding it all back out here, just speaking to as 2 moms that had early preemies, like it wasn't an easy road. It was really rough. And, there's so many things that we didn't know back then that we now know as functional providers, and really just taking at least 6 months to a year to optimize fertility before you start trying to get pregnant. It's going to be better for your health. It's going to be better for your baby's health, not even just initially, but many, many years down the road, because we know from a nutrigenomics side of things and a DNA imprinting how important those early that environment is for that baby. So, Annika, thank you so much for being on here. For the guests that are here, how is a way that they can find you? I know you're redoing a website now, also out on social media. Yes. So tell them where they can find you. And this will also be in the show notes.
So it's sleeplikeaboss.com. The website the URL will stay the same. So it's just going to get a new facelift. And then it's at _ Annika Carrol on Instagram, and it's Sleep Like a Boss on YouTube and on Facebook.
Perfect. Okay, we'll have that in the show notes. Well, it's been such a pleasure having you on here. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day and your career to come on here and chat with us.
Thank you so much. It was great.
Yes. You made it to the end of the episode. Let's keep this gutsy fertility party going with some next steps to empower you along your wellness journey.